5 different classes I'm going to guide through. And I say guide because I'll be learning just as much as any of y'all will. That's kind of the way I like to look at it. A lot of this stuff gets complex, and it's good to have, we have good minds in here tonight that we can discuss this. What we're going to be talking about is deacons. For those of you online, we have a book that we're going by, and we're in the deacon section, lesson 21. The book's called The New Testament Church by Roy E. Cogdill, right? Is that correct, Cogdill? When I was going through this, I really had to look at, we discussed it earlier. I really had to look at this really deeply because, and how to approach it. And what I decided to do was just kind of go down the questions and let the questions guide us instead of going through the lesson as it stands, because I got confused on that. There was some confusion in there, and what we think we've come up with is some of the scriptures weren't the right scriptures. So we're going to try to find the right scriptures on all these. But since we're talking about deacons, let's just go ahead and open it up as to what, when we say deacons, I know there is a definition, and there's one in the book here. But let's just start with our own minds. Doyle, when I say deacon, what do you think of when it comes to the church here?
Well, as far as the church, it's an office. That the word itself obviously means a servant, but it's an office that is referred to as a deacon, which means he's a servant of the church.
Okay. All right. Anybody else? Right?
Well, of course, there's two different meanings that was given here or more than several different definitions or words that's a descriptive terms. And of course, if you look at the word deacon as I guess those of the dictionary would look at it, or it would be actually a servant or a minister, someone that's willing to do a job, that type of thing. But when, as your dad said, as it comes to the church, it's actually an office that is within the church that is needed, and it's one that instructed, been given by inspiration of the Holy Spirit, that it should be through the apostles that we should have deacons, and every church should strive to have them, as long as you have qualified people, and it's God's plan for making the church be able to function the way it should function, having both elders and deacons.
Right, and I think we'll get into that a little later of the function that originally, the original need for the deacons. We'll get to that later on in this lesson. Doyle, didn't mean to put you on the spot there. Then if you had any, did you have any, you look like you were really concentrating on that. Did you come up with anything you wanted to say about that?
Those people have to meet special qualifications, more than just a servant of God.
Right.
All of us must be servants, but all people can't be deacons or elders.
Right.
Especially one qualification is it takes a man.
Correct.
Not women.
That's right. It's a male only position.
Husband of one wife.
Right, husband and one wife.
Makes be a man.
Correct. All right. Well, very good. I think that what we're seeing here is two different things that a deacon can mean, though, right? Like we're seeing the secular sort of general helper, waiter, servant sort of position, but then in the church, it's something different because of the qualifications that it takes primarily. Are we saying?
Yeah, I don't think I've ever heard anybody use it in the English language talking about something. Well, he or she referring to somebody as being a deacon. You might see somebody as a servant or even
Right.
a minister. And which we have come to the idea of using the term minister for a preacher, and really a minister is any Christian, one that's ministering, that's serving, is any Christian. That would be male or female. But as Dole said here, the way that it's used as description in the church, it has to be a man.
Right, as would an elder
Right.
would be.
Right.
So okay. Right now, then we have we pretty good definition of it though. We have a deacon as being someone in whether they are in the part of the church is that office or in secular, which we don't really hear it like you said much in secular language. It is a servant type of person. Now let's move on to question number 2. What it says, and I didn't really. I sort of had to dig around for this, but what was the term finally limited? And I guess they're talking about the term deacon limited to. I guess we would be talking about the powers or the responsibilities or the authority that the deacon would have.
I think it's talking about it's finally limited to how it's described as used within the First Timothy as an office. It's limited to being an office as a servant that works along with elders who are shepherds. And that's the distinction between the two, is one is a servant and one is a shepherd. The elder would be a shepherd. I think that's what it's talking about, what the term finally limited to is within the scriptures, of how it's used in the scriptures.
Right. Okay. Dad, you have any?
No, I think that's what I had in my answers. And one thing I might mention is probably the word deacon is the, I think they call it anglicized word for the Greek word,
Right.
diakonos.
Yeah, diakos, how do you pronounce it?
Yeah, diakonos.
Diakos.
Yeah.
Which says here it means to run or hasten.
Yeah.
So I guess it'd be like someone that would help or run maybe to go get things or yeah. Okay. So is there in that it's limited? It's limited. What would be a very good like description of the limits? If you had to like say in one sentence, what would be that limit of a deacon?
A qualified servant.
Qualified servant. Okay. I think that's pretty good. I think that's what all these are pointing to. Everything that so far we're discussing is pointing to is this is a servant. We'll deal with, I think, in the church more because that's what we're going to be talking about. A qualified servant. So okay, let's go to question 3. How did Paul speak of the Philippian church? That's Philippians 1:1. Let's read that. Let's see what we get with that. Philippians 1:1. Okay, so Paul and Timothy, servants of Jesus Christ, to all God's holy people in Christ Jesus at Philippi, together with the overseers and deacons. So that's actually mentioned here, with overseers being elders, and it's separate.
It showed a complete church. It addressed both the Christians that do not hold an office and then the deacons and the elders who do hold an office, which makes up a complete congregation.
Okay. And God's holy, yeah, so we have everybody there. Do we have any other comments on that? Dad, do you have a...
Well, the New American Standard says saints and bishops and deacons. So your version didn't actually refer to them as bishops, I don't think.
No, mine says servants of Jesus Christ and all holy people is what it says.
Right, yeah,
So
mine says saints for the holy people, and then the overseers, think you said overseers,
Overseers and deacons. Yeah, and you said bishops.
was it bishops?
Yeah, so that's interesting to see those different versions and how they address that. You know, it sort of broadens the perspective. I think if we sometimes get narrow focused on the words themselves that have multiple meanings and things, or actually the same meaning with different words. All right, well let's move on to 4 and contrast deacons and elders. I think this is where a lot of it happens with the mechanics of the church, because this will show, I think, where the deacons actually came from originally. Let's see. Let's go to Timothy 3, 1 through 13. 1 Timothy. So this is we're going to talk about the deacons and the elders' qualifications at this point. Rachel, you want to read some of that? You want to read maybe down to verse 8?
Is it 1 Timothy what?
1 Timothy chapter 3, verses, and we're just kind of going to 1 through 13 is what we're going to read through.
Okay. So 3, 1 through 13?
Correct, yes. You can just read as many as you want, or all of it, or whatever you want to do.
It is a trustworthy statement if any man aspires to the office of overseer. It is a fine work he desires to do. An overseer then must be above reproach, the husband of one wife, temperament, prudent, respectful, hospitable, able to teach, not addicted to wine or pugnacious, I don't know how that word is, but gentle, peaceable, free from the love of money. He must be one who manages his own household well, keeping his children under control with all dignity. But if a man does not know how to manage his own household, how can he take care of the church of God? And not a new convert, so that he will not become conceited and fall into condemnation cured by the devil. And he must have a good reputation with those outside the church, so that he will not fall into reproach and the snare of the devil.
Okay, we stop right there. Okay, so that's talking about overseers right there. But I think you will see that many of these qualifications are deacons and elders, as we will see in verse 8, starting in verse 8. Dad, you want to read that? Read that rest of that through 13.
Likewise, deacons must be reverent, not double-tongued, not given to much wine, not greedy for money, holding the mystery of the faith with a pure conscience. But let these also first be tested, then let them serve as deacons, being found blameless. Thus likewise their wives must be reverent, not slanderers, temperate, faithful in all things. Let deacons be the husbands of one wife, ruling their children and their own houses well. For those who have served well as deacons obtain for themselves a good standing and great boldness in the faith which is in Christ Jesus.
Okay, there's a lot in there for us to look at. So what we're looking at here are the contrasts in between the deacons and the elders, and so these are the qualifications for those. Did we see anything different in there that would contrast in the qualifications?
There's not a lot of difference in them.
Yeah, there's really not. I mean, there may be subtle, slight differences. It probably comes down more to to what the deacons can do to be qualified to do versus what the elders can do. Ultimately, in the qualifications, because it says likewise in the New International Version, at verse 8, it says, "In the same way, deacons are to be worthy of respect, sincere, not indulging and much wine, not pursuing dishonest gain. They must keep and hold deep trust of the faith and a clear conscience. So,
One of the things, an elder has to be qualified to be a teacher. Another thing is, uh, the, uh, the King James and the New King James mentions the word, don't be double-tongued, deacons don't be double-tongued. And I don't see that, in the, you won't find that, I don't think, in the, I guess, double-tongued and not being, but being gentle and not quarrelsome, kinda is the same, but I think double-tongued would be, somebody that you can depend on what they say. They're gonna say one thing, you can say something else to somebody else when you're
right,
not around.
right, like two-faced or,
In other words, you have to be a person that people won't look at you and say, how'd he become a deacon?
right, exactly.
Basically, you know.
Same as with elders,
Yeah.
and yeah, exactly, I see that.
You know, if you're a person where people, I'm not saying that there's, sometimes people just are jealous and that type of thing and say things like that. I'm talking about, you have to be somebody in the community, besides not just in the church, but in the community, that people think highly of.
Correct. Correct. And then, there's a list of qualifications here that the book has, and I think it's that they were mentioned in here. I'd like to go down that list because I think that'll bring some of this together, what we're talking about. The first one they had listed is grave, and Dad and I had a conversation about this, and at first I wasn't sure if that was a positive or a negative quality.
It's positive.
Yeah, and it turns out it is positive. Which, why did we wind up saying that was grave? That was
Sincere or not frivolous, something like that.
The English Standard Version uses the word dignified right there.
Yeah.
dignified. Yeah, that's a good.
I thought it was a good description.
Of grave.
Yes.
Yeah, dignified.
We have to realize that the King James Version was written in a language at the time that suited what the people at that time really understood. And
Right.
don't really match our language of today, even though everything is there for us to study. We can take the King James and it's a great Bible. We can take it and go to heaven with it. But the thing is, some of the words that are used within the King James, we may not use today. I wouldn't say, Harold, he's a grave man.
Yeah, definitely. If you talked like King James, if you use that old English, and people would think you were really odd, wouldn't they?
Yeah.
Yeah, they might not be able to understand you. And language changes so rapidly now, especially now with the internet the way it is, and
Right.
and people kind of merging languages, and the slang it's so odd, and so what we would consider, I guess, sort of academic language becomes more odd all the time.
I think if a man possesses dignity in his behavior, his demeanor, his actions, his family, whatever, that is something that is if a person did not obtain dignity, you wouldn't want them to be an elder. I mean, a deacon.
Exactly.
Where you're worshiping.
Exactly. Or not qualified. So, okay, the next one then is not double-tongued, and we talked about that already, and unless somebody wants to add to that. Not given to much wine. I think that, explains, it's kind of along with the dignity thing. If someone was a drunkard out in the community, we wouldn't want to have that person as a leader in our church.
I don't think a person ought to be sitting in a restaurant drinking and be a deacon either. It's just it's not letting your light shine.
Well, that's kind of what we're talking about there, having that.
That phrase I read, someone said that it means not given to much wine. It means not to be sitting at the wine. Person who makes it a habit of participating in drinking all the time. And
Right. That's where I would kind of.
that's the thing I think it's under, and both the bishops and the deacons, the same requirement there.
And I'm just wondering if it's referring to the wine of that day. See, you know, the wine of that day was a preservation type thing. It had very low alcohol content. Not wine of today that's packaged it's 10% alcohol.
Yeah, and I think you see sometimes there's not too much wine, or maybe because I think they probably were, like you said, it was mild or whatever, and they obviously were using it at the weddings and things in the Bible. And Jesus was there with it and all that. But I think they're probably talking about, like Dad was saying, being habitual at it, I guess.
You know, the thing is, if a Christian loses their influence if they're drinking and people know it, you're gonna lose your influence. Can't let your light shine. You do that.
Right. So for a deacon, that's a good idea, and an elder as well, and really everybody.
Yeah, I think you can make a good case. We don't have time to do it tonight, but the Bible teaches not to drink at all. But let's say that a person goes out to a restaurant and they do drink, just have one glass of wine with their meal. A lot of people do that. Whenever they do that, that may not have bothered them at all. It may never be a problem for them in their life. But somebody may see them do that. And that's where the influence factor comes in. And whenever they do, and that person could become an alcoholic just because of they following the example of a deacon or an elder who does it. It's just.
Well, and
I don't think this is saying that it's okay to drink a little bit. I don't think that's what it's teaching at all. It's not really dealing with that subject per se. But I'm sure some people, when it says not given to much wine or not given to wine, well, it's all right to drink a little bit. But like Ray said, when you look at the difference between what alcohol is now and what it was then, huge difference. Paul only told Timothy to drink a little wine for his stomach's sake, in other words, for medicinal purposes. And,
well, they had a strong drink at that time, just like we have today.
oh yeah, I'm sure they did.
They had strong drink, and then they had wine for preservation type wine.
And I've read where people that know a lot more about it than me and know about the history, they say that generally speaking, those people who thought that it was that the most reliable and refined people were the ones who did not drink wine unless it was watered down. So,
Right. Well, and I'm sure that's different for each person too. I think the best thing is the deacon says not too much wine, so they got to, if they want to be qualified for a deacon, you don't have much wine. So I think that's the bottom line on that one. Or not greedy for money. That's probably even more of a difficult thing for a lot of people to be. Greed is because sometimes could be perceived as, well, I'm just trying to get do what I got to do to survive. I see that a lot where people will be drug dealers or into crime in some way or whatever, and they'll say, well, I gotta survive, I gotta feed my family. And it's like, yeah, well, I don't know, I'm feeding my family. I'm not breaking those, doing those things, being a criminal or whatever. So, or being, someone could be greedy for money in other ways. It may not be, drug dealing or anything like that. It might be, bad business deals they're in. You're right, taking advantage of people. Probably more often, to tell you the truth. It would be somebody that would be greedy for money. I mean, I think that's self-explanatory. It has a bad connotation to the sound of it, and obviously something that we shouldn't be doing in any of our lives. Another qualification we have is holding the faith in a pure conscience. All right. So, what's that mean? Holding the faith in a pure conscience.
Yeah, that, my version says holding the mystery of the faith with a pure conscience. And, the mystery of the faith is what had not previously been revealed. And now it is revealed, or now at that time it was revealed. And with a pure conscience, I would say that you sincerely believe what you preach.
So it's being sincere, in other words. Just a kind of a fancy way to say that. Holding the faith in pure conscience. Ray, do you have anything to add to that?
I just put it as holding the faith with a clear conscience.
Clear conscience?
Yeah.
Okay.
I guess if your conscience is, if you're struggling with your conscience all the time because of your actions, then you're probably not qualified to be a deacon. Because if you know right from wrong and you are struggling with your conscience because you're doing wrong all the time, then you probably should take your name out from being a deacon.
All right. And proved. That would be a community thing, I would think. Proved. And tested, proved. That could include knowledge, I guess, of the Bible. Would be something that would be proved in there, as well as proved, like I said, in the community where your people would say, yeah, that's a good. He's worthy of that. People would.
Right. I guess it would be kind of like you don't take and this is kind of a bad example, you don't take a kid out of high school and make him an NFL head coach.
Good example. Good example.
In other words, you've got a Christian that is a role model type Christian that meets these qualifications, therefore he's approved.
All right, very good.
So this wouldn't be a new convert.
Right, I think that's yeah, you wouldn't want someone who's a babe in the Christ.
That's true.
Yeah, yeah. Okay.
I knew a man one time that, I won't mention the name of the church, but he identified with this church, and he was not by any stretch of the imagination a spiritual type of person, and they made him a deacon right away. It wasn't the Church of Christ, but that's kind of what it's talking about here. You prove the person first before you put him in that position.
And it may not be that it had to be proved with to me, it's not saying proved with a local congregation for a certain amount of time. I think it's proved as a Christian, as you, what type of reputation do you have in the world, in the church?
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
Right. If your name was to be put out and everybody said, yeah, it's a good idea, or,
Yeah, just
or
like, yes.
not a good idea.
It's like someone that comes here from another congregation, maybe moved into the area, well thought of throughout the church, wherever they've been. That's not somebody that, you're not gonna say, well, you're gonna be here for 5 years before we decide whether you're gonna, that's not what it's talking about. And it's
Right.
not, it don't even put a time frame on it. It shows somebody that's, I guess you would say, that has been nourished within the church and proven to both within the church and the outside community that this is something that they are deserving of.
I got a question. It's a little. It's not. I don't think it's part of this, but it's in this wheelhouse.
what do you think is, like, if you had a pool of qualified people, and you had some that were going to be elders and some that were going to be deacons, it's like, what would you think would be goes out to everybody, the lines we might say, okay, these people seem more elder-like and these people are more deacon-like. Would it be an age thing, or would it be?
I think you would look at their ability to, are they a shepherd type personality or a servant type personality? Are they able to teach? And also, I think you would go back to look at whether the children are believing children or not.
Right. So you'd have to look at each individual.
Plus, you would have to look at it would have to be, an eldership is a desired position, and I don't really think you would run into that because there would be qualifications that would lead one way or the other. And the thing about it is, if you got that many people, you've had probably a good sized congregation for a while, and you probably already had established system with elders and deacons. Therefore, additional people are added from time to time as they become qualified. I know what you're saying. I've never heard of that being a problem. It's usually right the other way around. You don't have what you need
Right.
for qualified people to be leaders.
Okay. Well, I just was curious about that because it's like, it would come down on age. Like, here are people who are more mature would be the elder types, and then. But I understand what you're saying, that you would have to look at their personalities because they might be any age. And
I would say this to you. There's a big difference between a shepherd and for example, if you were a shepherd is one that people are willing to follow their leadership. A deacon might not be a great leader, but meets the qualifications and is a great servant. And that's something that would have to be determined, by the church.
right, on an individual basis. Okay, well, that's a good answer. I like that answer. Okay, let's move on to question 5. Discuss the work of the deacons in light of Acts 6:1-6. All right, so I've got that pulled up here. In those days, when the number of, and once again, this is the NIV version. In those days, when the number of disciples was increasing, the Hellenistic Jews among them complained against the Hebraic Jews because their widows were being overlooked in the daily distribution of food. So the 12 gathered all of the disciples together and said, "It would not be right for us to neglect the ministry of the word of God in order to wait on tables. Brothers and sisters, choose 7 men from among you who are known to be full of the Spirit and wisdom. We will turn this responsibility over to them, and we will give our attention to prayer." Oh, I jumped. Let's see. Oh, there we go. I'm back. Sorry about that. Brothers and sisters, choose 7 among you, wisdom. We will turn this responsibility over to them, and will give our attention to prayer and the ministry of the word. This proposal pleased the whole group. Sorry. They chose Stephen, a man full of faith and of the Holy Spirit, also Philip, Procas, Nicanor, Timon, Parmenius, I'm butchering these, I'm sure, Nicholas, and from Antioch, and a convert to Judaism. They presented these men to the apostles, who prayed and laid their hands on them. Okay, so we're right here is, I guess, the birth of deacons, as we know it in the Bible. Would that be fair to say? That this is the first time we see deacons, or?
Well, That's a good question. As I studied this, the implication is that they were definitely appointed people. So it makes you think it's the office of a deacon, even though it don't specifically say.
Yeah, it doesn't
that.
really say a deacon, does it? No.
No. But,
But is it?
if it's not actually talking about a deacon, and I don't know what other people's thoughts are here, but if it's not talking about a deacon, it is talking about a work that a deacon can do. And it gives an
Right.
illustration that there needs to be appointed people to make sure that the work is carried on. And also teaches a concept that the leaders or the shepherds of the flock are busy shepherding, and they need assistance with things like this that need to be done that the deacons would do. Now, it teaches a concept like that.
It definitely shows a distinction between the overseer here and what their responsibilities
It
are.
also shows is if there's not appointed people to do things like this, things can be left undone.
Right, like important things, like take care of widows and.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's.
I mean, what do you think, Harold? Do you think it's actually talking about deacons here?
Uh, Probably, it's a good example of what deacons do.
Right.
But whether or not that's specifically the case or not, I don't know. It definitely, like you say, shows the distinction. Our problem is, we are so small. And, but these people here, there was a lot of people.
Right.
And so there was the need then.
Right.
There's not as great a need in our case because we have such a small group. But, and usually everything goes through the elders anyway. And they generally take care of most of these kinds of things. And they can do it because we are small. But definitely, whenever you have a larger group, that's where there should definitely be this distinction made between what a deacon or a servant would do versus, like you said, the shepherd.
Well, and another thing too here, the church was in its infancy here, in Acts 6, and we read over in the first, I think Acts 2, where there were poor people within the church. Some may have pulled up and left where they were to come to be with the church there, and it appears it did. And then you had, there were poor widows there that we probably wouldn't have today, and there seemed to be an abundant supply of them to the fact that they weren't getting taken care of like they needed to, which is the will of God that widows indeed be taken care of.
Right.
Exactly. And so that was another thing. More than likely, they just had an oversight. They had so much going on, and it was an oversight, and they didn't have what they needed put together to take care of it. And this was the plan for it to be taken care of.
Well, that leads to our question number 6: was the work spiritual or temporal of the deacons that we saw here?
I know what the answer he's looking for is temporal.
Right.
But anytime that you're taking care of a widow that is a neglected widow or that type of thing that's listed within the confines of the requirements of widows in the New Testament,
right,
you're doing spiritual work.
Well, I think that was a weird question, really, because the deacon is doing spiritual work by being here, and we all are. And that's the way I see it, and so it's kind of an odd question.
You're definitely doing the Lord's work, aren't you?
You're doing the Lord's work. Is it
just by showing up?
Is anything that you do doing the Lord's work spiritual? It has a spiritual. It's a spiritual.
Yeah, is any of it not spiritual?
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think so. I think everything we do is spiritual.
That falls within the plan and work of God.
Yeah, I mean, if you're painting the building here, it's God's work. It's to help the Lord. It's to, it's to uplift the church and to keep keep the word going. So, I mean, that gets into some minutia there. We can
I know
really,
what they're looking, what
Yeah.
he's looking for here is temporal.
right, temporary.
He's
He wants
trying to
temporal.
show the distinction between an elder and a deacon.
Right,
That a deacon, elder's work is a spiritual work of
yeah,
keeping people's, making sure their spirit, helping the flock along to keep their spirit in line with God's plan, so they'll be saved.
exactly.
That's basically it,
Yeah.
and that's really not a deacon's work. A deacon's work is to actually do, not to shepherd, but to actually minister.
Right.
And that's what he's looking for here. But what they were doing there was a spiritual work. I don't think we could say it wasn't.
Right.
They were doing an act, with taking care of serving the tables for the widows.
All right, we got 5 minutes, so let's hurry in. I think we can get all of these questions in. Let's specify the negative qualities that a deacon should not possess, or the negative qualities they are not to possess. What are some qualities over here? We could look at this list over here. Double-tongued, yeah.
Double-tongued, not giving them much wine, not greedy for money.
Yeah, those three alone there, and everything else.
What is the word? Y'all may have talked about this when I had to step out. But not greedy for money carries the idea of don't be making money dishonestly.
Right. We talked about that, and then cheating people, whether it's it's not just like going out and drug dealing or robbing or something. It can be in other ways that you influence someone to give you money. It's
Right.
Like a con artist, I guess.
Yeah.
So that's those. Yeah. So let's go ahead and go to positive qualities. What are the positive qualities that a deacon should have? Grave. That was one of them. I'll start us off here.
Grave or dignified.
Yeah.
Holding the faith and a pure conscience. I think that's a positive.
Yeah, I really like that one. The more I look at it, it's like I didn't really understand it at first, but
Being someone that's tested
really good.
and an upstanding individual.
Yeah. Rules their home, the children in their home well.
Right.
Yeah.
Blameless.
Yeah, blameless. Okay, so distinguish between the deacons and other members of the congregation. How will this go?
Must be married.
Okay, and obviously just a member don't need to be married.
Don't have to be.
Dole said be a man.
Yeah, be a male. Yeah.
Must be a Christian for some length of time.
Not a young Christian. So that's
New convert.
right, which someone just a member could be. So that's different.
Actually, members are not selected by the congregation than deacons are.
Oh, that's a real good one. Yeah, there's no membership selection. Okay, anything else? Those are all good ones. That's a good class. We're just finishing this up just right. We could read the conclusion here. Dad, you want to read the conclusion in the book at the bottom of page 58 in the book there? See what they have to say as their conclusion.
Generally, a deacon owes the same service to the Lord and bears the same responsibility as does every Christian. He, however, is one upon whom special responsibility has been laid. The church, as is true of every institution in the world, needs a leader or needs leaders. Deacons are men upon whom special responsibility can be placed without being shunned or evaded, and in whom there can be found in an outstanding degree the qualities of the real Christian character. And that's pretty good.
All right.
One of the things that, and Dole mentioned this, I think it's what he was talking about last week, there's not a lot said about deacons, what their responsibilities are. And what I can gather, the responsibility of the deacon is anything that's assigned to him that falls within the reins of doing the Lord's work. And I think God leaves that up to us. God leaves that up to us, what we ask the deacons to do, as long as what we're asking falls within the confines of the authority of the scriptures,
Right.
you know?
And that varies from congregation to congregation,
Right.
situation to situation.
I see, some congregations might have the idea that they're gonna put the deacons over, entertaining the children. You know, I can't find that within the confines of the scriptures. You know, I wouldn't give a designated role to a deacon to do that. I might tell the deacon that, you know, I want you to be over the responsibility of making sure the children are trained appropriately here, whether it be in the teaching program or whatever it might be. That's something that a deacon can do. Could set up classes, could help in choosing teachers, could put together schedules, that type of thing. And it's various things that basically elders need for them to be able to do their job and not taking on. I've seen elders have deacons, but the elders control and do everything.
Right.
And the deacons really don't even have assigned responsibilities. And that shouldn't be that way.
All right. Well, very good discussion. Appreciate everybody's participation. And next week, the study will be on evangelists. So that'll be another hopefully good discussion we'll have. And appreciate everybody's attention. And with that, we dismiss. Thank you.
I get it. Yeah.
We got a lot of buttons.
Nobody go home. We don't do that.
Well, I'll just stay here, wait for the next episode.
Yeah.
No, you have a good night.
I do, thank you.
We'll see you, Dole.
Tell Nancy that we
It's tired tonight.
I am.
Worked over the last couple of days.
anything we can do.
I told you last time I stayed up late.
Nice.
Night.
Yeah.